She is your daughter, David.
Our Emily.
We cannot simply let her vanish, I pleaded, my voice raw with a grief so profound it felt like I was being torn in two. My son, David, stood before me in the sterile white of his living room, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He did not look like a grieving father. He looked like a CEO whose prize asset had just been catastrophically devalued. She is not my daughter anymore, Mother, he said, his voice like chipping ice. She is a thief and a degenerate who has brought shame upon this family. You will not look for her. You will not speak her name. As far as this family is concerned, Emily is dead. He turned his back on me then, a final, absolute dismissal. And in that moment I knew I was facing a choice. Obey my son and abandon my grandchild to the wolves, or defy him and shatter what was left of our family in a desperate attempt to find my lost sheep. My dear friend, what does a grandmother do when she is forced to choose between her child and her child's child? It is an impossible soul-tearing position. If you have ever felt the ferocious, unconditional love of a grandparent, then you will understand the journey I had to take. Please stay with me. Your presence, marked by a like or a subscription, gives me strength. And when you tell me in the comments from what city you are listening, I feel a little less alone in my memories. Of all my 24 grandchildren, Emily was the sun around which all the other stars in our family seemed to orbit. As the firstborn child of my firstborn son, David, she was destined for greatness from the cradle, and she never disappointed. She was brilliant, graduating with honors from an Ivy League university. She was beautiful, with her father's sharp features and a smile that could disarm armies. She was successful, already a rising star at 30 in the marketing department of Vance & Sons, the company her grandfather had built. But more than all of that, she was my Emily. While some of my other grandchildren were lost in the whirlwind of their own busy lives, Emily always had time for me. She was the one who would show up on a random Tuesday with a bouquet of my favorite daisies. She was the one who would sit for hours on the porch swing, patiently listening to my old stories, her chin resting in her hand. She seemed to possess a deep, sentimental soul that was a rare and precious thing in our increasingly pragmatic family. She was, I believed, the true heir to her grandfather's heart. The first signs of trouble were so subtle, so faint, that I dismissed them as tricks of the light. It started about a year ago. Emily began to look strained. She was thinner. There were faint bluish shadows beneath her beautiful eyes that even her expert makeup couldn't quite conceal. Her bright, easy laughter seemed to take a little more effort. When I asked if everything was all right, she would wave a dismissive, manicured hand. "Just work, Grandma," she'd say with a dazzling smile. "Dad is a tough boss, you know." Then came the small, unsettling incidents. For her 30th birthday, I gave her a check, the same generous amount I give each grandchild on that milestone. But her reaction was different. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a desperate, almost frantic relief. She clutched the envelope to her chest as if it were a life raft. A few weeks later, during a family dinner at my house, I saw her take a tense phone call on the back porch. I only caught a snippet of her side of the conversation as I passed the window, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "I don't have it all yet. You have to give me more time. No, you don't understand. He'll kill me if he finds out." She saw me, and her eyes widened in panic. She quickly ended the call, forcing a brittle smile. "Sorry, Grandma," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Just a difficult client." The ugliest moment, the one I pushed down deepest into the recesses of my heart, happened a month after that. My beautiful sapphire brooch, the first gift my son Paul had ever bought me, vanished from the porcelain tray on my dresser. Emily had been the only visitor that afternoon. We had sat in my bedroom for an hour, looking through old photo albums. The thought, the monstrous, unthinkable thought, flickered in my mind for a split second. Could she have? I extinguished it immediately. It was impossible. I was a forgetful old woman. I had simply misplaced it. To even consider that my Emily, my perfect loving granddaughter, could be a thief. It was a betrayal I could not bring myself to contemplate. And so, I chose to believe a lie, because the truth was simply too terrible to bear. I wrapped myself in the warm blanket of my denial, even as the evidence of her distress continued to mount. I told myself it was just the pressure of working for her demanding father, the stress of a young woman making her way in a competitive world. I loved the idea of Emily, the perfect granddaughter, so much that I refused to see the terrified, fracturing young woman who stood right in front of me. I did not know then that my denial was not protecting her. It was leaving her utterly alone in the darkness, a darkness that was about to consume her and our entire family in its depths. The perfect facade of my granddaughter's life and my own willful denial finally shattered on the day of my 79th birthday. The family had gathered at David and Susan's home for a catered party. It was a grand affair, meant to showcase their success as much as to celebrate my life. I watched Emily move through the crowd. She was a vision in a silk dress, a champagne flute in her hand, laughing and chatting with a brittle, high-strung energy that set my teeth on edge. She drank too much too quickly. Her eyes, whenever she thought no one was looking, were wide with a hunted terror. It was Eleanor, my ever-observant, ever-critical daughter, who confirmed my fears. She cornered me by the fireplace, her gaze fixed on her niece across the room. "Mother, you need to open your eyes," she said in a low, sharp whisper. "Look at that girl. She is not celebrating. She is performing. Something is deeply, catastrophically wrong with her. David is too proud to see it, and Susan is too weak, but you see it. I know you do." For once, her cold assessment was not an attack, but a validation of the dread that I had been trying so hard to suppress. The end came not with a whisper, but with a raw, primal scream of anguish down a telephone line. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. A few weeks after the party, the phone beside my bed shrieked, jolting me from a restless sleep. It was Susan, David's wife, and she was hysterical. "Mary, oh God, Mary, it's over," she sobbed, her voice a shredded, unrecognizable thing. "He found out. David knows. He's going to kill her." My heart seized in my chest. I sat bolt upright, the blood pounding in my ears. "Susan, take a breath. What is it? What has happened to Emily?" "She's a thief," Susan wailed, the words dissolving into gasping, uncontrollable sobs. "A common thief, Mary. She's been embezzling from the company for almost a year." David was working late. He found a discrepancy. An offshore account. He followed the trail, and it all led back to her. She forged his signature, Mary. She moved hundreds of thousands of dollars. A fortune. It's all gone. He's in his study with the lawyers right now. The shame of it, Mary. The shame. The world tilted, the room spinning around me. My Emily, a thief? It was not possible. And yet I knew with a sickening certainty that it was true. The desperate need for the birthday check, the tense phone calls, my missing brooch, it was all part of this same terrible tapestry. "I'm coming over," I said, already throwing back the covers. "No." Susan shrieked, her voice thin with terror. "Don't, Mary, please." "He's like a madman. He's saying he doesn't have a daughter anymore," he said. "He said if he ever sees her again, he'll have her arrested himself. He's trying to find a way to cover it up, to keep it out of the papers. He's talking about ruin, about scandal." I was powerless, locked out, forced to sit by the phone in the dark, imagining the utter implosion of my son's family, of my granddaughter's life. The next morning, the second blow fell. It was Catherine who called me, her nurse's voice trying and failing to be calm. "Mom," she said gently, "I just got a call from a hysterical Susan. Emily is gone." "Gone where?" I asked, my voice hollow. "No one knows. Her apartment is empty. Her car is gone. She left a note on her parents' kitchen table." "What did it say?" I pleaded. Catherine took a shaky breath. Susan read it to me. It just said, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I can't fix this. Please, try not to hate me." Refusing to be locked out any longer, I dressed and drove straight to David's house. I found a scene of utter devastation. Susan's eyes were swollen shut from crying. And David was a man I no longer recognized. The charming, successful son was gone, replaced by a cold, stone-faced stranger, consumed by a rage so profound it seemed to suck all the warmth from the room. I went to him, my hands outstretched. "David, my son, we have to find her. She is in trouble. She is scared. She is your child." He turned to me then, and the look in his eyes was one of pure, unforgiving fury. It was then that he delivered the edict, the cruel words I had relayed in the beginning of this story. "She is not my daughter anymore, Mother," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "She is a criminal who has brought ruin and shame to this family. The only thing that matters now is containing the damage." "She is your daughter," I cried, my voice breaking. "Our Emily. We cannot just let her vanish." "She is dead to me," he repeated, his voice like chipping ice. And she is dead to this family. You will not look for her. You will not speak her name. You will tell anyone who asks that she has taken a job transfer overseas. This is a private matter, and it will be handled with silence. Is that clear? He was not asking for my agreement. He was issuing a decree. He was choosing the family name over his own child's life. He was choosing pride over love, shame over forgiveness. And he was demanding that I do the same. I left his cold, beautiful house, my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I was now faced with the most terrible choice of my life. I could obey my powerful, ruthless son and allow my lost granddaughter to be consumed by the darkness. Or I could defy him, declare war on my own family, and step into that darkness myself in a desperate and perhaps foolish attempt to bring her home. For 2 days, I remained a prisoner in my own home, trapped by the aftershocks of David's cruel decree. His words echoed in the silent rooms. She is dead to us. You will not speak her name. I was paralyzed by a grief so profound it felt like the foundations of my world had turned to dust. My son had not only disowned his child, he had commanded me to do the same. To obey felt like a betrayal of my own soul. To defy him felt like declaring a war I was too old and too tired to fight. On the 3rd morning, I found myself standing before the large framed photograph of my grandchildren that hangs in the hallway. It was taken 5 years ago at a happy family picnic. And there, in the center, was Emily, about 25 at the time, her arms slung around my shoulders, her head tilted towards mine, both of us laughing at some shared joke. The joy in her eyes, so real and so luminous, was a painful testament to the bright, beautiful soul that was now lost in the darkness. I looked at that laughing girl, the one who brought me daisies and listened to my stories, and I knew I could not abandon her. Whatever demons had taken hold of her, whatever terrible mistakes she had made, that girl was still in there somewhere. A father might be able to declare his daughter dead, but a grandmother's love operates under a different, more ancient law. You do not amputate a limb because it is broken. You set the bone and pray for it to heal. My choice was made. It was not even a choice, really. It was an imperative as essential as breathing. I would find her. I knew I could not do it alone. I called my war council: Catherine, Benjamin, Jessica, and Sarah. They came that evening, slipping into my house like conspirators, their faces etched with worry. I gathered them in the living room and told them my decision. Your brother has forbidden it, I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. He has threatened to cast out anyone who even speaks her name. But she is not dead to me. She is my grandchild, and she is lost. I am going to find her with or without his permission. I am not asking you to defy your brother. I'm only telling you my plan. There was a tense silence. They knew what I was asking. To side with me was to directly oppose David, the powerful, unforgiving head of the family. It was Jessica, my brave daughter-in-law, who spoke first. It's not a choice, Mary, she said, her voice firm. Of course we'll help. We are a family, not a corporation that cuts its losses. Emily is one of us. Catherine nodded, her practical mind already turning. It will be dangerous, Mom. David will retaliate. But leaving a vulnerable young woman out on the streets, with no money and no one to turn to, it's medically and morally irresponsible. We have to do something. Benjamin, my gentle son, looked terrified, but he took his wife Sarah's hand and found his courage. David can cut me off, he said, his voice trembling slightly. But he can't make me abandon my niece. We're with you, Mom. My heart swelled with a fierce, grateful love. My army was small, but it was loyal. Our first step was to find a professional. This was beyond our abilities. The next day, Catherine and I sat in the cramped, dusty office of a private investigator named Arthur Abernathy. He was a former police detective with weary eyes, a rumpled suit, and an air of quiet competence. I told him the whole ugly story. The embezzlement, the disappearance, and my son's cruel edict. I made it clear that we would be working in secret, against the wishes of Emily's own parents. Mr. Abernathy listened without judgment, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I was finished, he looked at me, his gaze penetrating. Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. I will take your case, but you need to be prepared. People who run this hard don't want to be found. And when you find them, the reality is often much harder than the memory. Are you sure you're ready for what we might uncover? She is my granddaughter, I said simply. I have to know she is safe. The investigation began. But David, in his fury, had anticipated my defiance. The first blow of his retaliation came 2 days later. Not against me, but against his more vulnerable siblings. Catherine called me, her voice tight with a controlled anger. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. David just called an emergency board meeting. He's invoking a morals clause in the company bylaws. He's pushing for a vote to have Benjamin's art removed from all the corporate offices. Says it's inappropriate to display the work of an artist whose family is associated with scandal." It was a petty, vicious power play, a direct shot across the bow designed to punish Benjamin for his loyalty to me and to frighten everyone else back into line. The second blow was even more direct. A letter arrived from David's lawyer, addressed to every one of my children, including the ones who had sided with me. It was a cold legal threat, stating that Emily was now considered a fugitive from Vance & Sons, and that any family member found to be providing her with financial aid, shelter, or any form of comfort could be named in a civil suit as an accessory to her crimes. The message was clear. David was not just trying to stop me from finding his daughter. He was using the full weight of his money and his lawyers to make it a crime for anyone in our family to show her a shred of human compassion. He was not just erasing his daughter. He was salting the earth where she had stood. I sat with the lawyer's letter in my hand, the cruelty of it taking my breath away. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was a war of ideologies, a battle between my son's merciless pride and my own stubborn, unconditional love. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Abernathy. "I have just been made aware of the risks," I said, my voice a calm, cold fury. "It does not change a thing. Spare no expense. Find my granddaughter." The war began not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, devastating maneuvers. David, true to his word, used his power like a bludgeon. A formal vote was called at the company, and Benjamin's beautiful, vibrant paintings were quietly removed from the corporate headquarters. It was a petty, symbolic act of banishment, designed to publicly humiliate him for his loyalty to me. Benjamin was heartbroken, but Sarah and the others rallied around him, their resolve hardening with every new injustice. Meanwhile, Mr. Abernathy began his methodical, painstaking work. His reports, delivered to me in discreet phone calls, painted a picture of a life I could barely recognize as my granddaughter's. He found her car, abandoned as we'd feared, at a bus terminal 3 states away. Tucked into the glove compartment was a half-finished knitting project, a scarf in my favorite shade of blue that she had started for me. The sight of it, when he sent me a photo, was a tangible symbol of the good, loving girl who was now lost. As the easy leads dried up, Mr. Abernathy began to dig into the dark, hidden corners of Emily's life. With a heavy heart, I gave him permission to investigate her finances. What he uncovered was not a simple case of youthful irresponsibility. It was the story of a disease, a secret, ravenous gambling addiction that had taken root in her soul. He found evidence of secret credit cards, weekend trips to casinos that she had disguised as work conferences, and a string of high-interest online loans. She had been living a frantic double life, the perfect golden grandchild by day, and a desperate, frightened addict by night. The embezzlement, he explained, was not an act of greed. It was the final, desperate act of a drowning person. The most terrifying discovery came a few weeks into his investigation. The tense phone calls I had overheard, the source of her constant terror, was not a difficult client. It was a loan shark, a predatory man with a criminal history to whom Emily owed an amount of money that made my blood run cold. "This changes things, Mrs. Vance," Mr. Abernathy told me, his voice grim. "Your granddaughter is not just a runaway. She is a hunted animal. This man will not simply write off the debt. She is in real physical danger." The fear I felt then was primal. This was no longer about family drama or a stolen fortune. This was about my granddaughter's life. David's cold fury, Eleanor's social anxieties, they all seemed like petty, childish squabbles in the face of this terrible, violent truth. The pressure from my family intensified. The legal threat had terrified the more timid of my children. I received a tearful call from my daughter Margaret. "Mother, please," she begged. "Just let it go. David is serious. You are going to tear this family apart. Is one troubled girl worth all of this destruction?" "She is not one troubled girl, Margaret," I replied, my voice harder than I intended. "She is my granddaughter, and yes, she is worth all of this." For weeks, Mr. Abernathy followed a trail of ghosts. He tracked Emily through a series of bus tickets and cheap motel rooms, always a few days behind her. He learned that the loan shark was also looking for her, his search more aggressive than our own. It was a race, and I prayed every night that we would win it. The breakthrough came from a place of utter despair. After a month of dead ends, Mr. Abernathy called me, a new energy in his voice. He had been tracking the loan shark, and the man had led him to a grimy, transient city in the industrial heartland, a place called Rock Springs. It was a town known for its underground poker games, a place where people went to disappear. "I have a feeling about this place, Mrs. Vance," he'd said. "I'm going to stay here for a few days. See what I can find." He spent the next week canvassing the city's underbelly, showing Emily's photograph in rundown bars, laundromats, and all-night diners. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday night. I was sitting in Arthur's chair, staring into the fire, when the phone rang. "Mrs. Vance," Mr. Abernathy's voice said, low and urgent. "I've found her." I gripped the receiver, my knuckles white. Is she all right?" "She's alive," he said, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "But she's not all right. I found a waitress at a 24-hour diner who recognized her. She comes in late, eats alone, looks exhausted. The waitress said she's using the name Grace. She's working a cash-only job at a motel on the edge of town, one of those places that doesn't ask questions." He paused, and his next words sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. "The man she owes money to. I saw him, Mrs. Vance. He's here. He's in this town. I don't think he's found her yet, but it is only a matter of time." "We are out of time. What do you want me to do?" There was no choice. There was no hesitation. The war with my son, the opinions of my family, the legal threats, none of it mattered. Only one thing mattered. My lost sheep was found, and the wolves were closing in. "I am coming," I said, my voice a command. "Do not approach her. Do not let her know you are there. Just keep her safe until I arrive. Book me the first possible flight. I am coming to get my granddaughter." The flight to Rock Springs was the longest journey of my life. Every mile that passed, I felt myself moving further away from the comfortable, familiar world I knew and deeper into a dark, unknown territory. I was a grandmother, armed with nothing but a stubborn love, flying into the heart of my granddaughter's secret hell. Mr. Abernathy met me at the small, grim airport. In person, his weariness was even more pronounced. "She doesn't know I'm here, Mrs. Vance," he said as we drove in his nondescript sedan. "And the man she owes, a nasty piece of work named Silas, is getting impatient. He's been asking questions around town. He's close. We have to do this tonight." The motel where Emily was working was a festering sore on the edge of town. A flickering neon sign cast a sickly green glow over a row of peeling, dilapidated doors. It was a place for people with no hope left. My heart broke to think of my Emily, my brilliant, beautiful girl, hiding in such a place. "I'm going alone," I told Mr. Abernathy, my voice firm. "You wait here. If I am not back out with her in 15 minutes, you may intervene." He nodded grimly, parking in the shadows across the street. I walked across the cracked asphalt, my sensible shoes feeling utterly foreign in this landscape of despair. I found her room, number 9, at the far end of the row. I could hear a television playing faintly inside. I raised my hand and knocked, the sound echoing in the cold, damp air. The door opened a crack. A sliver of a face, pale and thin, peered out. The eyes were hollow, filled with a hunted animal fear. It was Emily, but it was not. All the light, all the joy, had been extinguished. She was a ghost. Her eyes widened in absolute terrified disbelief when she saw me. "Grandma?" she whispered, the name a ghost on her lips. She tried to slam the door, a reflex of pure, panicked shame. I was faster. I put my foot in the doorway, my old bones protesting, and pushed it open. "Emily," I said, my voice breaking. "My child, I am not here to hurt you. I am here to bring you home." I stepped into the small, squalid room. It smelled of stale cigarettes and fear. Emily backed away from me, stumbling over a pile of clothes, her hands held up as if to ward off a blow. "No," she sobbed, shaking her head. "You can't be here. He'll find you. He'll find me. You have to go." "I am not leaving you here," I said, my voice a force of pure, unshakable love. I walked toward her and she flinched. I ignored it and wrapped my arms around her thin, trembling body. She was as fragile as a bird. At my touch, all her defenses shattered. She collapsed against me, her body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs of a soul that had given up all hope. "I'm sorry, Grandma," She wept into my coat. I'm so sorry. I lost everything. He's going to kill me. Just then, a pair of headlights swept across the room's grimy window. A large, dark car pulled into the parking lot with a low growl. Mr. Abernathy's voice came through a small earpiece he had insisted I wear. That's him. Silas, we have to go now. Is there a back way? Adrenaline, cold and sharp, shot through me. I looked around the room and saw a small window at the back, leading to a dark, overgrown alley. Yes, I said, my voice a low command. I pulled Emily with me. My darling girl, our time for tears is over. Now we must be brave. The next few minutes were a blur of frantic, whispered instructions from Mr. Abernathy. He had his car waiting in the alley. We scrambled out the window, a grandmother and her prodigal child, and tumbled into the back seat as he sped away, the tires squealing on the wet pavement. I looked back and saw the hulking figure of Silas kicking in the door to Emily's empty room. We had escaped, for now. The journey home was a long and fragile truce with the ghosts that haunted my granddaughter. She slept for most of the flight, a deep, exhausted sleep, her head resting on my shoulder. When she was awake, she was consumed by a shame so profound she could barely speak. I did not lecture. I did not ask for explanations. I simply held her hand, ordered her tea, and wrapped my cardigan around her when she shivered. I was a grandmother again, and my only job was to make my child feel safe. We did not go back to David's cold mansion. We went back to my home. I settled Emily into her old childhood guest room, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I knew she was safe. Then I made the call. David, I said when he answered, I have your daughter. She is with me. You and Susan will come to my house this evening at 7 o'clock. It was not a request. They arrived to find me sitting in Arthur's chair in the living room. Emily, pale but clean, her hair brushed, sat on the sofa beside me, her hand clutching mine. David's face when he saw her was a terrifying mask of rage. How dare you! He hissed, his voice trembling. You defied me. You brought this criminal, back into our lives. Get her out of this house. I will call the police myself. I rose from my chair, and the force of my own fury, a lifetime of love transformed into a mother bear's protective rage, stunned him into silence. You will do nothing of the sort, David, I said, my voice quiet but ringing with an authority he had never heard from me before. You have forgotten who I am. I am not just your mother. I am the majority shareholder of the company your father and I built from nothing. A company whose reputation you value more than your own daughter's life. You have failed as a father. You have used your power to threaten and intimidate your own family. And you have failed your father's memory. I took a step toward him. So here is your choice. You can find a shred of the father I know is buried in your heart, and you can help your daughter heal from the sickness that has consumed her. You will pay her debts. You will get her into treatment, and you will thank God that she is alive. Or tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I will call an emergency shareholder meeting. I will expose your cruelty, your threats, and your utter failure of leadership, and I will have you removed. The choice is no longer mine, David. It is yours, your company, or your child. He stared at me, his face ashen, all the power and bluster stripped from him. He was just a man, trapped by his own pride. It was Susan who broke the stalemate. With a sob, she ran past her husband and fell to her knees in front of her daughter. My baby, she wept. My poor, poor baby. The war was over. A year has passed. It has been a year of slow, painful, and beautiful healing. Emily is in recovery. She attends her meetings, she works a quiet job at a local library, and she lives here with me. She is paying back every cent to the company, her small paycheck's a testament to her commitment. The relationship with her parents is fragile, but it is there. Susan is a constant loving presence. And David is trying. He is humbled, quieter, a man forced to learn the hard lesson that some things are worth more than a perfect reputation. This afternoon, I am in my garden. The spring roses are just beginning to bloom. Emily is beside me, her hands in the rich, dark earth, showing me where to plant the new bulbs. The haunted look in her eyes is gone, replaced by a quiet, hard-won peace. She laughs, a real, genuine sound, and the sound is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. The injustice of that terrible time has not been forgotten. But it has been answered. It has been answered with a love that refused to surrender, a love that walked into the darkness and was not afraid. My family is not what it once was. It is smaller, scarred, but infinitely more honest. I learned that my greatest purpose was not to preside over a perfect family, but to hold the light for a lost one and to never, ever let it go out. A full year had passed since the day I walked into that desperate, lonely motel room in Rock Springs and brought my granddaughter home. A year is a short time to rebuild a life that has been burned to the ground, but Emily, my Emily, had the quiet, stubborn resilience of a wildflower growing through cracked pavement. The haunted, hunted look in her eyes had been replaced by a soft, cautious peace. She was attending her recovery meetings with a quiet diligence. She had a simple job at the local library, and her laughter, when it came, was soft and genuine. She was healing. Our home was healing. The canyon that had split our family, however, remained. My Sundays were now filled with the warmth of Samuel, Jessica, and their children. Samuel, having walked through the fire of his own shame, was a changed man, his envy replaced by a quiet, steady devotion. Catherine and Benjamin and their families visited often, their efforts to mend the trust they had broken a constant, welcome balm. We were a smaller family, but we were an honest one. Of David and Eleanor, there was mostly silence. A formal, brittle Christmas card had arrived, a stiff, impersonal phone call on my 80th birthday. They had not seen their daughter, my granddaughter, in a year. Their pride was a fortress, and its walls were high and cold. It was on a crisp autumn afternoon, as Emily and I were pruning the last of the dead roses in the garden, that the ache for my lost children became too much to bear. I watched Emily's sure, steady hands, and I remembered the fury on David's face. He was her father. How could a father's heart stay so hard for so long? I thought of the Aspen trip, of the brutal efficiency with which Eleanor had organized my abandonment, and I felt a profound, sorrowful pity. Their lives, for all their wealth and success, were so lacking in grace. A family, even a broken one, is still a family, I said, more to myself than to Emily. I have to try. One more time. That evening I called a meeting with my allies. I am going to host a dinner, I announced to Catherine and Jessica. Not a grand holiday feast, just a simple Sunday dinner. And I am going to invite David and Eleanor and their families. I am going to invite everyone. It is time to see if the bridge between us can be rebuilt, or if it has crumbled into the canyon for good. Jessica looked worried. Mary, are you sure? After everything they did, the legal threats, the way they spoke of Emily. I am not doing it for them, I said, my resolve firm. I am doing it for us, and for the grandchildren who are being raised in a family at war. I must extend the olive branch. Whether they accept it or burn it is their choice, not mine. The calls were the hardest I have ever had to make. I invited Robert and Brenda, who were still a toxic unit. I invited the neutral children who had been too frightened to take a side. And then I called David. I am hosting a family dinner in 2 weeks' time, David, I said simply. Emily will be here. I would very much like for you and Susan and your sons to come. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. I remembered the last time I had faced him down in this house, when I had threatened his position in the company to save his daughter's life. He had been humbled, but a humbled man is a dangerous one. We will be there, he finally said, his voice devoid of any emotion. The line went dead. Eleanor's acceptance was just as clipped and unreadable. A new, nervous energy filled the house in the following 2 weeks. Emily was terrified. What if he yells at me, Grandma? She'd whisper at night. What if he looks at me with that same hatred? Then I will be right beside you, I would tell her, and he will have to go through me. A few days before the dinner, Benjamin called, his voice low and full of a familiar anxiety. Mom, be careful, he warned. I spoke with David at the office. I told him I was glad he was coming. He smiled in this strange, cold way and said, It's time to finally put the family's business in order. I don't know what he meant, but it didn't feel like forgiveness. Benjamin's words hung in the air, a chilling premonition. My dinner of reconciliation was beginning to feel more like a trap. The day of the dinner arrived. The house was filled with the scent of roast chicken and apple pie, the sense of home, of tradition. My allies arrived first, forming a quiet, protective circle around Emily, who was pale but resolute. Then the others came. David and Susan, Eleanor and Robert. They walked in not with the warmth of returning family, but with the stiff formality of a delegation arriving for a difficult negotiation. There were no hugs, only curt nods. We sat down at the long mahogany table. It was the first time we had all been in the same room in over a year. The silence was deafening, broken only by the clink of silverware. It was David who finally broke it. He cleared his throat and placed his napkin on the table, a signal that the meal was over and the business was about to begin. "Mother," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "We were all very pleased to accept your invitation. It shows a desire to finally heal the wounds of the past year, and we have come here today in that same spirit. We have come with a proposal, a path forward." He slid a leather-bound folder across the table toward me. I looked at him, then at Eleanor, who was watching me with a cold, expectant look. This was no olive branch. This was a treaty, and I knew, with a sinking heart, that I was the one who would be expected to surrender. I looked down at the folder, its fine leather cool and impersonal beneath my fingertips. A deep, weary sadness settled over me. Benjamin's warning echoed in my ears. "This doesn't feel like forgiveness." He was right. This was not a peace offering. It was a weapon. With a heavy heart, I opened it. Inside, there was not a letter, but a thick, professionally printed document, full of dense legal paragraphs. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Proposal for the restructuring of the Vance Family Trust and the resolution of corporate debts." David cleared his throat, assuming the smooth, commanding tone he used in his board meetings. "Mother," he began, a magnanimous smile fixed on his face, "we have all been so impressed with the progress Emily has made this past year. It's a testament to her strength and to your love. We are, as a family, prepared to welcome her back fully. To that end, we have drafted a proposal. In it, the board of Vance & Sons agrees to formally forgive Emily's corporate debt in its entirety, releasing her from any future legal or financial liability." He paused, letting the weight of his supposed generosity settle over the room. I saw a flicker of stunned, desperate hope in Emily's eyes. "Furthermore," David continued, "we propose the creation of a trust, managed by the company, to finance her continued therapy and to provide her with a stipend to help her build a new, independent life. We want to see her thrive. We want to put this unfortunate chapter behind us, for good." It was a breathtaking offer. It was forgiveness, security, and a future, all tied up in a neat legal package. For a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost made me dizzy. Had I misjudged them? Had they truly found their hearts? And then David delivered the final paragraph. "The price tag. However," he said, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly, "the events of the last few years have made it clear to the board that the company's current ownership structure is emotionally volatile. It leaves our father's legacy vulnerable to sentiment. Therefore, to secure the long-term rational future of the company, we ask for one consideration in return for this comprehensive support for Emily. We ask that you sign over your majority shares to be placed into this new family trust. The trust will be managed by an executive board, consisting of myself and Eleanor. It is the only way to protect the company from future crises." The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the frantic beating of my own heart. The sheer diabolical cruelty of the proposal was stunning. They had taken my deepest desire, to see my granddaughter safe and my family reunited, and turned it into a ransom. They were using Emily's salvation as a lever to finally, completely pry my husband's legacy from my hands. Jessica was the first to find her voice, which was trembling with a rage so profound it was almost a whisper. "This is monstrous," she said, her eyes fixed on David. "You are using your own daughter's trauma, her illness, as a bargaining chip to seize control of this company. This is the most despicable thing I have ever witnessed." "It's a business decision, Jessica," Eleanor countered, her voice icy. It's time this family was run with logic, not emotion. But before the argument could escalate, a new voice joined the fray. A quiet, shaking but resolute voice. It was Emily. She stood up, her small frame trembling, but her eyes were clear and strong. She looked directly at her father. "No," she said. "Absolutely not." David stared at her, dumbfounded. "Emily, sit down. This is for your own good." "No, it's not," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's for your good. I will not be your pawn. I don't want your forgiveness if this is the price. I will work for the rest of my life to pay back every cent I stole from you. But you will not use me to hurt my grandmother. You will not use my shame to fuel your greed." She turned to me then, her eyes full of a love so fierce it took my breath away. "I don't need the money, Grandma," she said. "I have you. That's all I need." In that moment I saw her. Not the broken child I had rescued, but the strong, honorable woman she had become. She had found her own redemption, not in a legal document, but in an act of selfless love. A profound, liberating calm washed over me. The final battle was here, and I finally saw the path with perfect clarity. "I invited you into my home today," I said, my voice steady and clear, hoping to find the children I raised. "Instead, I find I am dining with thieves. You speak of my sentiment as a weakness. You are mistaken. My love is the only thing of value that has ever been produced by this family. It is the love that built this company. It is the love that saved your daughter, David, when you had already buried her. And it is the love that has allowed me to endure your endless, selfish betrayals." I pushed the folder back across the table. "Here is my answer. My company is not for sale. My love is not for sale. And my granddaughter's soul is not a commodity to be traded. Your proposal is rejected." I stood up, my old bones feeling stronger than they had in years. "I see now that a bridge cannot be built across this canyon because you are determined to dig it deeper. I am finished with trying. From this day forward, my family will consist only of those who understand that love is a gift, not a negotiation." I looked at the faces of David, Eleanor, Robert, Brenda, and the others who sat in silent complicity. "This dinner is over," I said, my voice ringing with a final, quiet finality. "I must ask all of you who came here with this document to leave my home. Now." They left in a storm of silent fury, their plot in ruins. The door closed, leaving behind a smaller, quieter room. I looked at the faces remaining around my table. Emily, my brave, beautiful girl. My loyal sons and daughters. My courageous daughters-in-law. The family was smaller than it had ever been. But as I looked at each of them, I knew, with an absolute and peaceful certainty, that for the first time in a very long while, everyone sitting at my table truly belonged there. The silence that followed the departure of my estranged children was a strange and complex thing. It was not the heavy, grief-stricken silence that had followed the Christmas abandonment. It was a clean, quiet, and resolute silence. It was the sound of a diseased limb being amputated to save the body. The surgery had been brutal, the wound was deep, but for the first time in years, the house felt free of fever. Life settled into a new, quieter rhythm. My family was smaller, but it was whole. Sundays were once again filled with the easy laughter of grandchildren, but now it was only the grandchildren of the children who had chosen love over pride. Samuel and Jessica were a constant, steady presence, their marriage stronger than ever, forged in the fire of their shared moral stand. Catherine and Benjamin visited often, their apologies no longer just words, but quiet acts of service, Benjamin patiently fixing a squeaky floorboard, Catherine checking my blood pressure with a gentle professional touch, and Emily. My Emily was the heart of our new beginning. The year of healing had transformed her. The shame and fear that had made her a ghost were gone, replaced by a quiet, powerful grace. She worked at the library, she attended her meetings, but her true calling, I saw, was here, in this house. She became my memory keeper, my confidant, the steady hand on my arm as I grew a little more unsteady on my feet. The pain of her past was not erased, but it had been repurposed, turned into a profound empathy that made her the wisest soul among us. The other half of my family remained on the far side of the canyon. We heard whispers of them, Eleanor consumed by a bitter, resentful pride, and David, running Vance & Sons with a cold, ruthless efficiency, the company's profits growing even as its soul shriveled. They were ghosts at our feast, their absence a constant silent reminder of the high cost of peace. The final chapter began, as so many do, with a simple, unexpected fall. It was a Tuesday in early spring. I was reaching for a book on a high shelf and my foot slipped. The landing was hard and a sharp, white-hot pain shot through my hip. I awoke in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Catherine was there, her face a mask of professional concern, but her eyes were full of a daughter's fear. The diagnosis was a fractured hip. The surgery was a success, but the doctor was grave. At my age, he said, the recovery would be long and difficult. For the first time, I was truly frail. I was truly a burden. The news of my hospitalization, of course, ripped through the family. My loyal children rallied, setting up a constant vigil by my bedside. But it was the reaction of my other children that set the final, terrible act into motion. They saw my weakness not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. It was Benjamin who brought me the news, his face pale with disbelief and fury. "Mom," he said, sitting by my hospital bed, his voice a low whisper. David and Eleanor. They've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. You're in the hospital and they're making a power play. What do they want? I asked, my voice weak. They're invoking the incapacity clause in the corporate bylaws, he said, his hands clenching into fists. They're going to argue that your health crisis proves you're no longer capable of managing your affairs. They're going to put a motion to the board to force a buyout of your majority shares to ensure the stable leadership of the company. They're using your broken hip to stage a coup. I looked out the hospital window at the gray city skyline. I had fought so many battles. I was so tired. A part of me wanted to just let it go, to let them have the bricks and mortar and the balance sheets. But then I thought of Arthur. I thought of his calloused hands, of the dream he built, a dream of honor and quality. And I thought of Emily, of the redemption she had fought so hard for. I could not, would not, let David and Eleanor's greed be the final chapter in our family's story. With a surge of adrenaline, I reached for the phone. Get me Ms. Reed, I said to Catherine. The next morning, as David was laying out his case in the Vance & Sons boardroom, detailing my cognitive decline and emotional instability to the solemn-faced board members, the doors swung open. It was not I who entered. It was Ms. Evelyn Reed, and behind her, dressed in a simple, elegant business suit, was my granddaughter. Emily Ms. Reed walked to the head of the table and placed her briefcase down with a soft, authoritative click. Gentlemen, she said, her voice cutting through David's stunned silence. This meeting is adjourned. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Mary Vance, in her full and legal capacity as majority shareholder, has invoked her right to dissolve the current board of directors, effective immediately. A wave of shock and outrage filled the room. You can't do that, David sputtered. Oh, but she can, Ms. Reed said with a cool smile. And she has. Furthermore, she has appointed an interim CEO to oversee the company's operations and guide its restructuring. Allow me to introduce her to you, Ms. Emily Vance. Emily stepped forward, her gaze clear, calm, and unwavering. She looked at her father, not with triumph, not with anger, but with a quiet, sad strength. The golden grandchild he had discarded had returned, not as a prodigal, but as the queen. My recovery was long. But I came home. I am weaker in body now, but my spirit has never felt more at peace. The company is in the hands of my Emily who, with the loving support of Catherine and Benjamin, is slowly but surely bringing her great-grandfather's values of honor and quality back to the heart of the business. David and Eleanor have retreated into a bitter, wealthy exile. They lost the war, and in doing so they lost their family. Perhaps one day their hearts will soften, but I no longer wait for it. This afternoon, I sit on my porch swing. My hip still aches, but it is a gentle reminder of the battle I won. Emily is beside me, reading a report, her brow furrowed with the same determined focus I used to see in her grandfather. The long, terrible saga that began with her fall from grace has ended with her becoming our salvation. My family is smaller, my body is frailer, but my home is filled with an honest, hard-won peace. I have learned that a legacy is not a company or a bank account. It is the character of those you leave behind. And the legacy I see in my granddaughter's eyes is stronger and more beautiful than anything I could have ever dreamed. My dearest friend, we have reached the end of this very long and winding road together. Thank you for being my silent, steadfast companion through it all. Your presence has made the telling of these painful memories possible. If this final chapter has touched you, I would be so grateful for a final like and subscription. I wonder, what is the most important legacy a person can leave behind? I would be so honored to read your final thoughts on this long, complicated matter in the comments below. You have all become a part of my story, and for that I am eternally grateful.